All right. Hello, everybody. It is so good to see you. My name is Crystal Sophia. I'm your friendly astrological magician, and this is our Monday Magic Mood Boost, where we as a community in the chat go live together and talk about the astrology coming up for the week. We talk about ways to use folk magic in alignment with the astrology for the week. And sometimes I go off on a rant about theology, mythology, folk magic, astrology, anything like that. Today I have like maybe a little micro rant that I can talk to you about. It's not even much of a rant, but it is a really funny question that I was able to explore when I was on social media this weekend. And it leads me into a pretty funny little rant. This is more on the theology side of things. So if that sounds interesting to everybody in the chat, let me know and we will make some time for that probably near the end of today's live. I've also been reading as I was getting ready to go live. Jenny, you have a new guardian gnome for your yard and his name is Gerald. And I think that that is fantastic. Good morning, Jenny. Good morning, Amber. For anybody who's wondering, Amber is our wonderful mod. So Amber will help me keep track of any questions because I'm here to answer anything that you need. Hi, Rita. Good book recommendations for learning about Athena. First and foremost, from my side, will always be to read the actual original lore. So I recommend especially reading the Odyssey, and then just anything you can about the original kind of stories that Athena played a part in. If you're looking for something more modern that gives a nice kind of energy, we just finished in the Modern School of Ancient Wisdom. We were reading Circe by Madeline Miller. Athena is not central in that, but she does have a role that comes up in that, and you can kind of get into the energy of Athena there. But first and foremost, my recommendation is always go back to the source and then work forward from there, because the source gives us what was contemporary for the time that Athena was being actively patronized, or people were patronizing Athena. But that doesn't necessarily mean that what has been recorded is perfect. So another book I recommend for almost just understanding women in mythology in general is Demetra George's Mysteries of the Dark Moon. Mysteries of the Dark Moon, it looks like, I always got to find it. It's always the first one on the shelf too. It looks like this. Yeah. And it goes into a little bit about astrology, but it's also listed under women's studies, which I think is fantastic. And it goes into the way history has been recorded versus the way things may have gone if certain people hadn't been the ones who recorded it. Cough, cough, patriarchy, cough, cough, I guess. But so that's something that I would recommend Rita as a good place to start. And then, of course, I think if you're working with Athena, she would guide you to a lot of resources that she would want you to go for. But it's a good way to get into it is to go back to, where did we start with this? When was Athena the most active, and when were people more viscerally working with her, and how can I read about that? That's kind of how I've done everything. I've filled these shelves with like, how close to the source can I get, and then where do I go from there? Jenny says, I have a guide that gives beings nicknames. He's called Athenia, Owl Face. I love that. That's amazing. Owl Face. Oh, he calls Athena Owl Face. Got it. The first book recommendation, Amber, was the Odyssey, and I recommend reading the translation by Emily Wilson. It's a woman who translated it, so she actually does a little bit more justice to what culturally the women would have been represented as, and because it's coming through that lens, I found it really helpful. So the Odyssey, actually, I think I can type this. The Odyssey, translated by Emily Wilson. There we go. I think I spelled that right. No, I didn't. I misspelled Wilson, but it's Wilson. So you can find that in a ton of places, and it's really helpful. Awesome. Cool. Thank you, guys. Yeah. So how are we feeling? We had a really interesting, it was a good teamwork there, Amber. It was a really interesting, hey, Jendi. Interesting full moon in Sagittarius this past week. We had some other major things going on at the same time. We also have the solstice coming up this week, the Cancer solstice. So for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, that is summertime. For those of us in the Southern Hemisphere, that's going to be bringing in winter in the shorter days of the year. If you have any questions about solstice, and even I kind of do want to talk about something that it's almost like just astrological accountability on this point. Over the last week, we have talked about Jupiter in Cancer. Now, on a personal level, many of us are celebrating the luck and fortune and joy that comes with Jupiter in Cancer because Jupiter is exalted there. What I want to also acknowledge, though, is that some crazy stuff is happening on a more social and global level. Jupiter is a social planet. It moves at a slower pace. It's going to spend a whole year in Cancer. And it is not just exalted. It is not just in a good position. There are other factors at play. So I like to kind of relate it to when you have on your watch face a bunch of different things, they're called complications. So like the weather on my watch versus my steps for the day on my watch, each of those is considered a complication on my watch. And I just want to give context to the way I'm going to use this term. So in astrology, it's very much like a watch. We have multiple complications going on at the same time. So while we do I loved seeing people come out and support Jenny. I loved it. It was amazing. It's so cool to be alive during this time for that reason. And there are other things also going on at the same time. Like we all kind of came together that day. My dogs were also upset. Hang on a second. Jack needs air jail. So you're about to get introduced to Jack. You have such a loud and prominent, lovely voice. Come and meet my friends. Okay, so this is Jack. He's going to hang out with us a bit so that he can calm down. So this is Jack. He is very focused on what is outside that window. So I apologize that he's not as focused on you guys. So when we think about this weekend, other stuff happened too, right? And with that other stuff, it's stuff that we weren't happy about. A lot of us were not happy about it, which is why we came together on the alternative side to make our opinions and thoughts and voices heard. And so those other things, and even beyond that, across the world, there are crazy things. You want to actually sing into the microphone there, buddy? There are so many things happening, and there are going to continue to be pretty world-changing things occurring. And there have been, right? There have been world-changing things occurring for the last 5 years. One of the sides of this is that some of us are feeling kind of fatigued, and I get it. And I'm going to give you the solution to this on the other side, actually. So with Jupiter in Cancer, that does not mean that we are going to have the ultimate remedy to all bad things in the world. Jack, you are growling right into the microphone. So you got to calm down, Bubby. So it's not going to be the ultimate salve for all things forever, unfortunately. But it is going to give us opportunities, right? So when we think about astrology, it's a back to the basics kind of thing, right? There are many complications, and we have to make sure that we don't complicate it in our head so much that we forget our basics. Hey, Shauna. And so, Rita, I'm sorry if Jack is setting your dog off. Hi, Liz. I didn't get to say hi. And Jack does have opinions, Gabe. And chime in, Gabe. I know you're an excellent astrologer, and I really trust you. I consider Gabe to be one of my best and most incredible mentors in astrology, for anybody who's wondering. And Gabe, I think you do also offer consultations. So, so there's that. But with Jupiter coming into Cancer, yes, Jupiter is exalted. However, we want to think about several things. My students in the student study, we've been talking about this. We're going to talk about this more tomorrow because it's our astrology lesson for the month. And we'll be talking about, here you go, pal. All right. We will be talking about Jupiter's phase in relation to the sun right now. Jupiter's going to have Cazimi with the sun, so be exactly conjunct with the sun next week. But that means that right now, Jupiter is in a phase of dying. So it's not Jupiter's strongest moment. Jupiter is under the beams of the sun, burned up, getting ready to be refined and reformed. And so in this, we're not getting Jupiter's strongest, best version of Jupiter's self. Additionally, Jupiter is in that now separating, thank you, gods, and anybody else up there, now separating square, finally, the last one with Saturn. Yesterday, the perfection of that square happened, and it was the third in a series of 3 squares that happened over the course of the last year, marking one of the first pivot points in the 20-year cycle that began when Jupiter and Saturn conjoined in 2020. There are more things I could go into there, but it requires rabbit holes, many of them, cycles and turtles all the way down. So just knowing that we're in this other great cycle. And then another thing that happened over the weekend, of course, was Mars squaring Uranus. Those two create like firecracker energy, to say the least. So we have a lot of things going on while Jupiter is in this excellent position. Jupiter is struggling at the moment. It's got all the things it needs to feel comfortable, but let's say it's getting overwhelmed by notifications and overwhelmed by the news and overwhelmed by other things. So that comfort, even though we're surrounded by all of our fuzzy blankets, it's not turning down the noise. Now, later, I'm looking towards like August, September for magical elections for Jupiter, because Jupiter will meet with the sun next week and then begin to rise out of the sun's rays, still in Cancer, and now separating from Saturn. And so that's a bit more of the alleviation we're looking for. And when we think about the tone, of course, we have to relate it back to the Aries ingress. We have to put it into the context of the charts of the mean triplicity shift. We have to do all sorts of things that give us layers and layers of context. Why do we do so many complicated things? Because it makes it more specific, right? So if we just looked at a chart and said, generally, Jupiter in Cancer, yay, and then bad stuff happened, we'd be like, what the F, dude? And honestly, yeah, right? So there are more layers of nuance and context that lend themselves to explaining what's going on, what to expect, how potent Jupiter in Cancer will be able to be, what Jupiter actually represents in a planet of itself. We like to think about planets, because we're very focused in modern times in our personal traits of planets, but the planets do represent types of persons as well. If you get into more traditional texts, they'll say Jupiter rules judges and the wealthy and those kinds of things. And so Jupiter in exaltation is Jupiter and everything Jupiter represents exalted, more able to do the things that it wants to do. So we have to think specifically, perhaps, about that category of people as well, among other things, right? So in your personal chart, what Jupiter is doing is saying yes and doing good things. And so it is giving you personally good stuff to work with. But when we look at it on the scope of the world and we zoom out very far, that's when we have to start looking down at the chessboard and seeing what piece does Jupiter represent? How does that move? What's the strategy that seems to be playing out in front of us? So how do we deal with the fact that it's not going to be rosebuds and perfection the entire time? Because unfortunately, Saturn stays in fall longer than Jupiter stays in exaltation. So we want to keep an eye on that as well. And to summarize what I'm talking about with all that astro jargon, the thing that I would say for us on an individual level, and this is actually inspired by a conversation I had with my husband yesterday, with everything stressing us out, the best thing that we can do, and this is really funny considering that he and I are both currently for the next 2 days in a 12th house perfection year, sharing that time together. But we're both focused on our inner work. We're both focused on who we are. We're both focused on maintaining our peace of mind. We're focusing on how we can make sure that we are staying supported, sustained, and all those other things, comfortable in things that are changing around us. And we're making sure that we have plans for whatever we feel we need plans for, in order to be able to say, I know what I'll do if this thing comes to pass that stresses me out. So I'm going to share that with you guys too, because we are in a chaotic time, right? And this is good advice for any time of instability, or any time where you're like, I don't know what's going to happen next, and it's kind of stressing me out, but I don't have control over it right now. Know what you would do, and then do your inner work. This is how you occupy your time in between. So, just like earlier this year, I had a lot of instability in my life, and I did a lot of work on myself, but I also learned to crochet and to solve a Rubik's Cube, got back into playing piano, started working on my voice work again. I gave myself things to do that made me feel good about who I am, what I'm capable of. So become the person that you want to be in these times. And that is based solely off of how you feel happy. So you can't lose sight of what makes you feel happy, right? So keep focusing on those things, and make sure that you give yourself the ability to lean into joys, because that, we say it on the podcast all the time, joy and fun are forms of resistance just as much as anything else. And they're going to help you sustain yourself so that you're prepared for anything that you need to do. So again, I don't want to be the person that glosses over the way social media often tends to. I don't want to be the person also who fearmongers the way social media often tends to. This is me trying to give you all the phases of the spectrum as I'm kind of seeing it in my own research, and aligned with the timing that I'm using to monitor the astrology and everything else. As you can tell, we're already 15 minutes into this conversation. This is not something I can put in little 1-minute snippets on social media. So I'm glad you guys are here where I can share it with you more in detail. And to Danny and Shauna and my other friends in this chat who are part of the student study, we will be talking about this more tomorrow. I'm going to show you guys on the chart which planet set in the directed timing for the Aries ingress this year last week and how that coincides, and which planet is actually getting ready to have another motion today. So we'll start thinking about that, what that might see, and we will observe and then correspond as well. So the best way to learn predictive stuff, in my experience, in multiple levels, is to take something and observe. You can say, I expect this might happen, but make sure you don't forget to say, this is what did happen, so that next time that pattern comes up again, you can build on a stronger idea. You can do this right away by even just looking at history. Being an astrologer makes you so much more fascinated by everything else in the world, because suddenly history is far more interesting because you can see the patterns of astrology that corresponded with it. And then mythology is super interesting because it helps you understand the archetypes of the planets. Then you get into cultures and religions of the ancient world because you need to understand what they were thinking and what their context was so that you can understand what they were actually trying to say in their documents. And I'm so good now on a trivia night because I have been able to learn so much due to this interest of mine. And if you don't have the energy or the time to put into all of that, just let me do it for you. I will share it with you. If you have questions, I will answer them to the best of my ability. If you want me to do your astrology for you personally, I will do a consultation with you. You can do that through my website. If you want to learn from me, I do stuff every week in our Patreon. So I'm doing my best to make things as accessible as possible because I know astrology has become one of my coping mechanisms. And so if it helps you as well, I'm happy to share it. Cool. Let me catch up on our comments. Yeah, Amber, the become the person you want to be in this time is something that I coined when I was talking to our city council during 2020 in the city I lived in at the time, because they were like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I was like, well, how do you want to tell this story in 5 years? Now we're 5 years later. And so we decided how we wanted it to go. And then we said, well, what action do we need to take now in order to make that be the way the story goes. And it really helps, right? It's like, I'm in chaos. I'm a little confused. I'm feeling off balance. How do I want to tell this story later once it's done? And then you decide how you want the story to go. And you as the main character get to take all the actions that hopefully will help you build it that way. And then you roll with the punches as they come. Yeah, it's been, oh, Shauna, thank you so much. I'm glad it's been helpful. I am trying to make sure that I keep myself as balanced and rational and, do all of the things I can. And I have my own support to help me do that. I work with a therapist. I work with mentors in astrology and theology to make sure that it's not just my interpretation that you're getting. I get out of my own head so that I can be fair with what I end up sharing. And I think that that's really important. Never forget to give yourself the support you need. I've learned that so much this year already, and I know it's going to be a continued theme for me over this next year as well, because 12th house perfection year. Gabe, I know you get it. Cool. Rosebuds are a really good analogy. The amount of work to put into a rose to make sure it blooms. Makes sense with doing inner work to make sure we ourselves grow into the best rose we can be. Yeah, Jenny, that's a great idea. Remember, we give so much grace and nourishment and nurturing to other things outside of ourselves. And then we forget to actually do it to ourselves. Yeah, 12th house activations are something. Yeah, you should have seen my solar return this year too, Gabe. It's stunning. It's stunning. But yeah. When Demetra George looks at your Time Lord for the year and says, well, it can't be worse than it is usually. At least you know that. And that's great. And honestly, I'm having a great year. To be honest, since my birthday, things have been going really well. And I've been leaning into actually doing the work. Yeah, that's exactly how it felt, Gabe. Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, instead of things happening to you, take action so you happen to things. I love that. Usually I was expecting and anticipating, Misty, for you to be like, so that they happen for you. And then you were like, no, I happen to the things. That makes me very happy. I love that a lot. Um, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. So I covered a lot of ground with that one. Any questions? Anything else I can clarify? Was anything I said like too mind-boggling and confusing? Can I be better at explaining? Just let me know. And then also feel free, anybody who has some cool stories about the Sagittarius full moon we had last week, let me know about that too, because it was ruled by Jupiter, who was now freshly in Cancer and exalted. Um, and the mutable signs, I've noticed a lot of people with heavy mutable signs are experiencing things right now. And so Sagittarius, of course, is also a mutable sign. It's where the full moon was. I'm actually going to pull up that chart right now. I'm looking at something too far in the future, because I am going to Iceland this week. I will be in Iceland I'll be in Iceland for like a week, and then I'm going to stop over and go to the Bodleian Library, and I'm going to share with you everything I do there, because I'm going to try to research some ancient astrological and magical texts there, because they have them. So hopefully I'll be able to share with you guys some of that. But that also means that, unfortunately, I will not be here next Monday. I will be next Monday. Good Lord, I'll be in Iceland next Monday. Time feels so fake to me right now. It's very odd. Good morning, Meg. Yeah. Shauna, do I have a favorite ritual for the summer solstice? So, Shauna, you're also in our student study, and I shared a couple ideas for the for rituals and stuff. I believe I did that yesterday, if I scheduled things correctly. So hopefully you should have some ideas in there. My thing, especially this year, I'm going to be spending the summer solstice in Iceland. And so Emily and I are going to, with everybody who's joining us in Iceland, we are going to stay up all night. And the experience that we're going to have is, of course, in Iceland right now, there is no nighttime. We get 2 hours of what they consider twilight. So we will be experiencing 24/7 daylight. And I can't think of a better way to celebrate the sun at its longest hours of the day than to be in a place where it's just up all the time. So that's one thing. For anybody else, watch the sunrise, watch the sunset, so you can experience that duration of it. You can also, if you're thinking about folk magic stuff, it's a great time to cleanse your altar and shift it into some more stuff on your altar that is more seasonally appropriate, summery things. Hi, Echo. Um, some other stuff, a bonfire. Have a bonfire with your friends, or if you can't have a bonfire, light a candle, use your fireplace, some kind of thing that really kind of emulates the heat of the sun that is at its peak right now, or coming into its strongest moment. So just remembering, all you have to do to create a ritual is to remember sort of the symbolism of the moment. This is the sun at its most sunness. It's not in Leo yet, but it is at the time of the year where it has the daytime. The daytime is predominant. It is the longest day of the year. This is the most influence the sun gets over our days in the entire year. It is as alive as it gets. And so if you think about that, and then think about how many of these solstice rituals are to honor that aspect of the sun being at its longest daylight position, for the northern hemisphere anyway. For the southern, you want to think about the more shortest day position. And in which case you could use a bonfire outside in nature where it's warm to celebrate that the sun is having its longest day. You could also use a fire if you're in the southern hemisphere to kind of celebrate that the sun is being reborn where you are. The sun has its shortest day. It has kind of metaphorically died and now will return. And so while we have the sun up here, you are anticipating its return in the southern hemisphere. So hopefully that helps. Yeah, all my favorite people are here too, Danny. This is my favorite thing to do in the week. I think live broadcasts are probably my favorite thing ever, just because I get to interact with people more. And it's really nice to see you all. You took a class on how to make incense and powders. We made incense and powders at the Sacred Spaces Getaway a couple months ago. I'm working on some incense right now that's not really seasonally accurate. It's rosemary. But right now I'm working on growing what will become my incense later. So I did get some more Mako powder this week to make sure that when I want to make my incense, I can. I typically make incense cones. It's because they're a little bit easier. It's like playing with Play-Doh. It's really great. I have a video somewhere on my Instagram and on my TikTok that show you how to do it. And if you're in the student study, you have our little mini grimoire that helps with that as well. Yeah, I'm going to try and watch the sunrise and sunset and light a candle. Yay, that's perfect, right? I think honestly, if it were me, and this is just totally me kind of riffing off of my own things that make me feel like summer, I would be making s'mores. I would be making s'mores around a campfire with people that I can laugh with. That to me would be like the best celebration. It's not necessarily traditional or anything like that, but I love it. You're nervous without setting off the fire detector. Yeah. So I've only set off my smoke alarm once when burning something in this house. And like my altar's there, my smoke alarm's right there. And like I said, I've only done it once. I would just be ready to turn it off if you need to. Or you can have it in front of a window that you keep open. And so the air kind of draws the smoke out. And then anything that you wanted to perhaps consecrate or move through the smoke of that incense, you would just move it around with that. But that is a valid thing. That's very valid. Hey, Aaron, it's good to see you. You can do that with your son. He loves doing that. Yeah. So again, celebrating with people, feeling alive. That's the kind of stuff that we want to get into, because if you think about what in the winter will you miss about summer, do all the things now, right? That's one way that you can actually access, like, what should I do to celebrate? What are you going to miss the most in winter when you can't do it? And then do that now. Hi, Melissa. It's good to see you. S'mores with a peanut butter cup. Oh, yeah. That does sound amazing. I would do, okay, if you could do a crazy s'more, what would it be? I would do s'mores with a peanut butter cup and a double stuffed Oreo. But like, I don't know if I would, yeah. Maybe I would take the peanut butter cup and make the double stuffed Oreo the s'mores part. So instead of the graham cracker. That sounds delicious to me. Yeah. That is such a good idea. Yeah. Thank you, Echo, for that inspiration. Woof, that sounds good. S'mores with chocolate graham cracker. Love it. Yeah, my phone validated that. Clearly, next, I need to find a way to take some peanut butter cups and Oreos with me to Iceland. Honestly, guys, I'm one bagging it, as I always do, but my bag is full. The talismans I've made for everybody this time are dream staves, which had to be carved into wood. And so I thought, what's my easiest way to get access to wood that I can buy in like bulk so that I can make these staves for people? And so I got shims, wood shims. They're very thin. I think I have like 24 of them. So I have 24 wood shims that are going to be in my bag. And I'm just waiting to go through security and have them be like, what's this? And I'm just going to tell them I did some arts and crafts for my friends that I'm going to see in Iceland. And that is what it is. It's true. Arts, as in like magical arts, crafts, as in like magical crafts. But yes, I did do that. The idea, though, is that these shims will fit right underneath your pillow without bugging you, and they'll be able to do what the grimoire says it'll do, which is give you the dreams that you desire. So we'll see how it works, and we'll report back from Iceland. Yeah, cool. The ding agrees. I've seen someone stick a peanut butter cup on a stick, then dunk it in marshmallow fluff. That is a good plan. I used to take pickle forks and stick them in double stuffed Oreos to dunk them in milk or Nutella, because then you don't have to get your fingers all messed up and they won't break. So if you stick a pink pickle fork in the icing of a double stuffed Oreo, it probably works for a regular stuffed Oreo too, but I always got the double stuffed. You can stick it in the icing and dunk the whole thing and it'll be good to go. And it's wonderful and cleaner. So highly recommend. Yeah. Think maybe I'll make sun tea on the solstice. It seems like a nice way to catch the sun's energy. I love that. Yeah. Anything that you want to be able to do solar energy with, let me look at the chart for the solstice and just confirm that like all that feels good. Because, sometimes we have, it's like, oh, it's a new moon in Cancer. This is amazing. And then you notice that the new moon in Cancer is like, this time, I think it's like it's applying within a minute or within a couple degree minutes to Mars. And so it's like, okay, it's Maybe not the most restful and rejuvenating moon in Cancer. It is a sextile to Mars, so it's one that's just like maybe you're resting to be able to get energy to take action. Who knows? Um, but so what we will have on the solstice is the sun at 0 degrees of Cancer, sextile the moon at 0 degrees of Taurus. She is exalted there and she is co-present with Venus, loving all of that. The sun, of course, is with Jupiter. The sun is applying to Jupiter. So Jupiter is about to fall into the sun. We call this combustion. We're like in the sun right now. Think about like an orbiter on the sun and they send it in. You can't see it anymore. It's under the rays, right? But when you lose it in the atmosphere of the sun and it's just like that's combustion, right? Don't ask me to make that noise again. I don't know if I could. Yeah, we all need pickle forks. I like that idea. But yeah, so the solstice itself, we've got Jupiter nearby. Which typically is a good thing. The sun, of course, burns up stuff as it goes by. So you want to just kind of take that for what it's worth. The moon is really good. It is separating from the sun by about 30 minutes. It's going to be applying to anybody else closer? It's applying to Mars. Yeah. So Mars just keeps getting in there with a lot of stuff lately. Every time I look at it, it's like, where's the moon applying? It's usually applying to Mars. Mars will at this point be freshly in Virgo, which is not any bad or good situation for Mars. He's direct, he's visible, he's okay. Yeah. So savory s'mores, plain cracker with melty cheese and prosciutto. I've heard tell of this, Liz. That makes so much sense. And I could see like a caprese s'more. That'd be amazing. When I was a kid, we used to do mountain pies, which you need like a special thing to do it. It's two iron plates, and then they're each attached to a handle. And so you'd put a piece of bread, all the stuff you want, another piece of bread. Typically, we would do pizza ingredients, and you press it together, and then you would be able to hold that in the fire and go both ways. So it toasts it it's like a homemade hot pocket. And it was always very good. We called them mountain pies. I don't know why. Probably because they were designed by mountain people, because we lived in the Appalachian Mountains. And yes, in Pennsylvania, we called them the Appalachian Mountains. It's just the way we said it. I know more further south in like Kentucky and stuff, it's Appalachian. Both are correct. Just depends on what region you're from. That is correct. Good. Cool. Yeah. So, this year and next year, there's a lot of overtones of change and shifting. And, the world is figuring stuff out. And within that, we just have to make sure we take our little joys and we focus on how great things can be on the individual level. If they are not great on the individual level, do everything you can to put yourself in a safe position, obviously, right? We don't want to bypass. We don't want to, we don't want to just like ignore things that need action. Clearly, because Mars keeps sneaking in here every time I look at a chart. The moon is applying to Mars. So action is definitely something that is part of what we are doing. But it's also important not to burn yourself out to the point where you cannot take action and where you're miserable and sad to the point of listlessness. Take care of yourself. And if this can be a space that helps you do that, let me know if there's anything else we can do. I want to be here for you. I really want to be here for you. I'm here with you for sure. Let it be known there are some stressful stuff. So there's stressful stuff happening in the world right now. It's a thing. But if this Monday Magic Mood Boost can be a sacred place for you to come every week where you feel aware and rejuvenated and supported by an excellent community, because this chat is the coolest thing I've ever experienced. Please join us and always and let me know stuff that helps. I am open to questions. I would be happy to answer questions for you, especially if it's something that's making you feel unsettled to the point of dysregulation. And if I can use astrology, rationality, and other resources to say, yeah, let's look into this and try to help with it, I'm game. Research, as we all know, is something that I do enjoy doing. So especially, it might take me a week. If there's something that I don't have the resources immediately for, I will do the research in that week and come back on the next Monday Magic Mood Boost and do it. We've seen me do this in the rants. So I'm happy to. That's why I started working from home on Mondays. Oh, Shauna. I appreciate you so much. That is so incredible. I appreciate that more than you can imagine. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so if there's anything anybody needs, let me know. If you have any questions, if you have any stories that you're excited to celebrate, God, let's create a place to celebrate things. So please feel free to in the chat be like, this is my celebration for this week. And we will celebrate because we're going to need as much of that as we can get. And we always do, right? There's never a time when celebration isn't something that's worth making space for. So I'm excited about that. Yeah. We're having a really good time talking about different ways that we can do s'mores, and I love that. If you make s'mores for the solstice, I would love if you would tag me if you post it on social media and just let me know what kind of s'mores you've been making so that I can see them all. That would be cool. Yeah. And if you have friends that also need a sacred space like this, please feel free to invite them. There's no limit to how many people can join us in this. And it will always be free to come to the Monday Magic Mood Boost. And I will always do as much as I possibly can. Yeah. Cool. Nice. Well, so this week's transits that I was thinking about, we have the solstice, of course. Um, trying to rewind my brain because like I said this morning, I was working 2 weeks in the future to make sure that all my content is still scheduled and ready to go. So that while I'm in Iceland, you guys will still be getting all the updates. I worked ahead. So you won't even know that I'm gone unless you see pictures of me in a colder place. There will be where we're gonna be. I'm fascinated by this. We're gonna be on glaciers. We're gonna be hiking on glaciers. Um, and I'm not the most balanced person to begin with. So I'm really excited to see how funny this trip is going to be. I'm looking forward to some funny stories to be able to share with you, both in our podcast recap that we will be doing after the fact and just here on social platforms. Yeah. So while I'm gone, we will experience, let's see, Mars is going to move into Virgo tomorrow. And then next week, we'll have the Cazimi on Tuesday of Jupiter and Saturn. That should be a pretty nice day for Jupiter and Saturn, or not Jupiter and Saturn, sorry, Jupiter and the Sun. You can only have a Cazimi with the Sun. Um, Jupiter and the Sun will have their exact conjunction. Jupiter will be reborn. When a planet is in Cazimi with the Sun, ancients would say it was like in the heart of the Sun and sort of like enthroned there. So it's a good moment at the midpoint of the death and regeneration process where we get to really have that pointed, almost as if Jupiter is the magnifying glass and the Sun is going through it, and you get this really sharp Jupiterian thing happening. So looking forward to that. Thank you, Echo. I need the ankle stability big time. My ankles have never been the best, which is funny because for me, like Pisces, well, Pisces does have Mars in it. So, for anybody interested, Pisces rules the feet and ankles. Let's see. And then the new moon in Cancer is on the 25th. We talked about that a little bit. And honestly, the aspects that week are trines and sextiles while Mercury moves into Leo. Then we do have Mercury opposite Pluto on the 29th. So, stuff may arise in headlines and stuff around that. Just make sure that you're careful about what you say and how you say it around that time. Mercury, of course, ruling conversations and things, and Pluto, really liking to incite that whole regenerative process of death and rebirth. So you might say something that needs to be said and leads to a deeper clarity and a deeper relationship with someone, but that may come through some deep discussion and honesty. So it's just possibilities for how that might show up in a more personal level. And then I'll be back. I'm really hoping I get back, I think, on the 30th. So I should be back on the 1st of July to be here again working with you. So I should only miss the sorry, I get back on the 29th, so I should be back on the 30th. My calendar I'm looking at here starts on Monday, and I expect it to be on Sunday. So I should be back on the 30th, and I already have that live scheduled, so you can set your notifications up for it. So next week, you don't have to worry about anything, and then you'll be notified the week after that we have our discussion, as usual. Yeah, so that'll be fun. Next week, Amber gets a week off. I hope you enjoy it. We always appreciate how hard you work in the chat here. You do an incredible job. Yeah, so 1 week, lots of transits. Just pace yourself next week. There's a lot of stuff happening with this. There's a lot of involvement with outer planets as well. So because of that, outer planets interacting with more inner planets and more personal planets, just make sure that you pace yourself. If you need a break from the news for a while, that's okay. um, just making sure that you take care of you the way that you need to be taken care of, because I mean, when I zoom out and try to have a higher perspective of things, I'm very honored and happy to be a part of a time where things are changing and I get to participate in that change. And then if I focus in on it too much and get the tunnel vision around the things, it can exhaust me really quickly. So if that's something that happens to you as well, when the headlines just keep on coming, give yourself a break. If you take a day or two of not looking at the news, or even more, whatever you need, or if you find other ways, just first and foremost, no matter what, if you're looking at the news at all, find good resources. If you want in the comments, let me know. I can let you know my personal favorite ones, but always stick to what feels right for you. Misty is saying, I saw an Iceland set Hallmark Christmas movie last year, The Christmas Quest. It was fun following clues to the Yule lads. I love that. Yeah, so Hallmark Christmas movies are my comfort in the holiday season as well. So I really like that you mentioned that. Very, very appropriate, Misty. Thank you. Um, and of course, like the Hallmark movie network is on all year round, and some of them have gotten really good at being more culturally aware and inclusive. Sometimes I expect them usually to be a little bit, you know, bypassy, I guess is one of the nicest ways I could say it. But often they will be conscious about their representation, and I always get really impressed and happy when I see that. Yeah, so I feel like you need a break from from my person life. Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, we're all going through this and we're all it can be so easy to get in our heads, right? And then when you're in your head, it changes everything about what you see outside of your head. And then it changes the way you hear everything, and all of your senses get discombobulated. This is something that Dan and I talk about frequently because, so many things come up and we have to decide what's sensationalized, what actually do we need to pay attention to. And, sometimes life is stranger than fiction. So I also recommend turning to fiction. Read a book, read cozy fiction. That is my escape, especially this month. There's been some pretty good cozy fiction I've gotten into. And I'll be able to talk about that. I believe it'll be next week's podcast that airs, but we're doing a double recording of the podcast today to make sure we give you more content there as well, because Emily and I will both be in Iceland. There will be one repeat episode, and we're doing one that is a favorite interview that we've done. So still recommend listening to it if you want. Misty, 1440 is one of my favorites too. Yeah, 1440 is a good one. Try to limit how often you access the news. Yeah. I also really like ground news as an astrologer, right? When something happens, I'm often checking the transits, or when a transit is coming up, I'm often trying to find out how did that show up. And so I go into the news as part of my job, and I use ground news because it helps me siphon through the resources to find, the most bias, to find the least bias, to find the most factual, to find totally not customizable, but, goes through and weeds through it for you. And it helps me when I hear something that concerns me and I need to make sure that it's real or not real. And it also helps me when I'm using astrology to just be like, here, what are the headlines that may have actually corresponded with this? And how is it maybe being spun one way or another? And I need to get to the actual lack of bias. So ground news is very helpful for me in that sense. Yeah. And then of course, there are also some really great influencers. V Spahar, I follow them. And sometimes they also use ground news. I know that they've mentioned it a couple times. And so I'll follow them, see what they're up to, and then also cross-reference what they say with ground news. I usually do that with every influencer I follow around news, just to be doubly sure, to help myself stay grounded. So yeah, I'm really glad that some of these resources have been helpful for you guys. That's great. Cool. Is there anything else that people would like to talk about? Or this might be a sign that I should go into my little mini rant on um, this fun question that my husband happened to across on social media, and then we decided to actually do the math. Do you want me to go into a mini rant about theology? Because it's going to be a funny thing that's going to lead me into an actual grounded rant, and the source texts I can cite. Yes, cool. So the question was, you know how in the Bible during communion, there is the Eucharist, right? The Eucharist is, this is my body broken for you. Jesus breaks the bread. And there was a huge discussion throughout history of, is Jesus God? Is Jesus human? Is Jesus somewhere in between or a blend of the two? Was Jesus human until he got on the cross and then he became God in those last couple minutes or hours? And like the whole Council of Nicaea, which is the council that most of us have heard the most about, was called together by Constantine. And there was this big debate on Jesus God, Jesus human, or something in between. I know that there was a man there named Arius, and he had a strong following. And I believe that their take was that Jesus was God. And so when you were partaking of the bread, are you actually eating Jesus's body? You know, like, is this the metaphorical, it becomes Jesus's body magically? Yeah, magically during this Eucharist, when you're taking part of the wafers or the bread. And so we looked up, the question on social media was like, how many communions would you have to go to in order to eat the entire body of Christ? And so in doing the math, we crunched the numbers. Are you ready for this? Yeah, exactly. So this gets into the I'm a vampire thing, Amber. We're going to get into the issue of Christians being persecuted because they were accused of being cannibals. I'm going to get into that after the end. It did happen. Yes, we did not think much differently from then to now in this context. So, for the sake of crunching numbers, satirically, right? We know that like this is not, it's not the same thing. Or if your belief is that it is, this can just be a fun fact for you to carry with you. So let's assume, right? There's so much math that goes into this that I would not have been able to do on my own. So I'm looking at a text from Dan because he did the math. So if we assume that an adult male in ancient Judea likely weighed around 130 to 150 pounds, then we just use 140 as a middle. Assuming about 60% of your body is water, you're left with about 56 pounds of just non-water mass, right? So this would be the body that would become the bread. The average communion wafer weighs about a quarter of a gram. And so when you do the math, 56 pounds equals 25,400 grams. And so that divided by a quarter of a gram would be 101,600 wafers, would compensate for the entire mass of an actual physical body situation. So you would need to take communion 101,600 times in order to have taken in the entire mass of that. So that would be, you know, if you do one communion a week, let's say, I know this is the Catholic way of doing things. It was actually one a month when I grew up because I was Protestant. And so once a week, you would be going for about 1,953 years of weekly communions. Or if you went daily to try to knock that down a bit, you'd still have to take communion 278 years before you would actually achieve this consumption of the entire body of Christ. So there's your math. Now, yes, to your point, Amber, that sounds like cannibalism when you put it in that context. Fun fact. So I have read, there are these it's a 2-volume textbook it's called The Story of Christianity. I highly recommend it. I got very defensive if I felt like it was reaching towards a bias, and it usually walked itself back. So the Story of Christianity did a great job of explaining that a lot of the Christian persecutions that happened in ancient Rome were actually the same kind of context as what happened to Jesus himself when he was turned into Pontius Pilate. So when Jesus was turned into Pontius Pilate, it was his own people that were like, hey, this guy is a pain in the butt. He's going against everything we believe. We want to turn him in. And so Pontius Pilate did the thing where he questioned him and is like, do you really think you are God? Can you just say you're not? Blah, blah, blah. There was this whole process. And then Pontius Pilate washed his hands of it and gave them another choice, and they chose Jesus. And then Jesus was crucified. Similarly, now Jesus is this hero, and you get the rise of the cult of Jesus, which is what it was originally considered, right? And so that became your Christians. Fast forward a couple hundred years, we're still Roman. And so at this time, the people who identify as Christians in Rome are irritated because all of the holidays and a lot of the social gatherings are focused on pagan rituals, deities, and things that they don't relate to. And they get pretty heated about this. And so they complain outwardly. And so the only way still that someone can be persecuted for their beliefs is if they are turned in by another person, like a neighbor. And even then, they need to be interrogated. It is highly recommended that they just change, that they stop believing the way they're believing, and then they're allowed to go back. So typically, the process at the time was, can you renounce this? Can you renounce this? Can you just change and not do this anymore? And if they said no, 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 then yeah, you're going to be persecuted. You're going to be killed. Sometimes it was by crucifixion. Sometimes there were a couple occasions that happened in the Colosseum. But if we wind this down and say, okay, wait a second, they can only be turned in by someone else of the community. Many of the times when someone was turned in for being a Christian, the grounds were that they were saying the grounds were of incest and cannibalism. Why? Because Christians were meeting in the home. Church actually occurred at first in cemeteries because it was a public place where you could have a public gathering. And then they also held church in the home very frequently at the time. And so people would come to a home and they would have their services. And these services, during them, they would be claiming to partake of the body of Christ. And they would be claiming that, my brother and my sister, that's how they would call each other. And actually, if you read the footnotes of the Oxford Annotated Bible, they say that that was actually a term of affection just generally. So you could even call I know like Abraham and Sarah did the sister thing, but they meant it literally so that Abraham wouldn't get killed when they were trying to find their homeland. Later on, though, it was a term of endearment and affection, right? So they would be calling each other brother and sister, and their neighbors would say they're incestuous, and their neighbors would say they're cannibals. And if I put that into a context, and I imagine that today's people are not so different from ancient people, at least in this case, I have to believe, or at least assume, or think, or wonder that perhaps these were annoying neighbors. That maybe the people who were turned in were annoying to their neighbors for some reason or another. And so their neighbors got fed up. And though they may have been able to read between the lines and they may have known that this is just their way of practicing their religion, they are partaking of bread and calling it a body, and they are calling each other brother and sister in Christ. I don't care. I need them gone. So I'm going to turn them in for this. And so I know that what happened was they were turned in for those reasons. My theory is that perhaps these were neighbors who were so annoyed that this is what they used to validate their, like Roman HOA members. That's exactly it. And so that is kind of how a lot of this happened. It's not quite the heroic montage that we're kind of given in Sunday school, but it is how it happened. And so, again, my sources for this are the Oxford Annotated Bible. I read the footnotes, so you don't have to. And then also The Story of Christianity, volumes 1 and 2. And I will tell you, if you get The Story of Christianity, volumes 1 and 2 on audiobook, the audiobook narrator is the same guy that read Brandon Sanderson's books. So it's actually not so dense. It actually feels kind of exciting because he still reads it with that kind of weight to it. So I really enjoyed having the same guy who read to me Mistborn reading to me The Story of Christianity. And there's so much other stuff that we could get into about that. But that is the rant-ish for today. I'm pretty sure a lot of the persecution originally for Jesus himself and otherwise was people who were just ticked off and annoyed at these people who were disrupting their neighborhoods, very much HOA style. And in fact, if you read my Shifted series, which is not complete yet, but the first 2 books are out with a couple of novellas, in Shifted, the main villain is an HOA that went nuts and actually got to have its own nation at some point. So that's kind of how I feel about the idea of HOAs in general anyway. Traitors, the reality game show, reflects group think when believing accusations. Yeah. And who knows, right? We weren't there. We weren't there to witness like the specifics of how irritating one person was or how prepared to sell someone out another person was. We don't know what they were thinking on an individual level, but that's my little headcanon. Yeah. So that's where it's at. that's the idea. It's a bit of a shorter rant today, but it's one I've been keeping in my back pocket for a little while now. And now that I had this fun fact to share with you, it was a great little segue into it. So now you know exactly how many wafers it takes to get to the entire body of Christ. And now we have a little bit of context on the way the persecutions were held back in ancient Rome. Yeah. Cool. So, any questions? Anything else? We have a couple more minutes. I could definitely address some stuff. The mathing is impressive. The mathing was not me. I want to say that first and foremost. Again, credit goes to Dan. Dan did the math. It makes sense, but there's a lot of conversions and stuff in there that probably would have tripped me up, and I would have gotten numbers in wrong places. So that's just the way it works in my brain. My brain does a lot of things really well, and then there are some things that it just really it asks that I don't do that. So as compensation for how much good it does for me, I usually outsource my mathing just to be sure. Yeah. Yep. Also, you guys, I missed the mathing. Okay, Gabe, I will repeat to you the mathing. So what we did was how many wafers would be the entire body of Christ. So I know it sounds like the Tootsie Pop thing. I was going for that. So if you were to assume that an adult male in ancient Judea weighed somewhere between 130 to 150 pounds and you took 140 as your average, then you would have about 60% of that body being water, as many of us are. You're left with about 56 pounds of dry mass. So the dry mass is 56 pounds. And then the average communion wafer weighs about a quarter of a gram, 0.25 grams. And so 56 pounds equals 25,400 grams. If you divide 25,400 grams by that quarter, that 0.25 grams, you get 101,600 wafers that it would take to compensate or be equal to an entire body mass. And so you would need to take communion 101,600 times, which if you actually math that down into weekly communions, you would get 1,953 years of communions, or you could break it down into daily communions, which would give you 278 years of daily communion in order to have consumed what would equal the mass of the entire body of Christ. Congratulations, you did it. But yeah, so there it is. And this was a question I think we ran into on Reddit over the weekend, just to give full sourcing for everything, full credit. The question was inspired by something we saw on Reddit, and then we took it from there. So yeah, Ren, how is Yeshua like as a deity or a guide? I actually do work with, I call him Jesus, but I think it's my theology mentor and I consider the difference between Jesus, the way that he's been made by Christianity today, and what we call, and it's not the best version, it's not the word that I want to settle on, it's a for now phrase, the cosmic Christ or the Christ energy. I've been known to call it the Christ energy. And that is really fun to work with, honestly. But if the question is, how does he feel about today and the way that the reputation of Jesus is being used, I would look at the song Sound of Silence as recorded by Disturbed. It does a really good job of expressing the gradient and the spectrum of emotion behind. When I heard it for the first time, my husband was like, "You got to listen to this version of it." And I was like, "Ooh, that's resonating with how I've communicated with the Christ energy or Jesus as a deity, right?" So recommend listening to that and see if anything feels resonant to you too, if you're interested. Yeah, that version is impactful because there's a part of it that just feels like there's gentleness, then there's frustration, and I can just hear Jesus being like, "Do you not have ears to hear?" Which Jesus spends most of the New Testament insulting people. I don't know. We don't get this generalization much in church, but almost the entirety of the New Testament is people being like, "Really?" And he's like, "Did I not? Did I stutter? Did I stutter?" Doesn't sound like Jesus liked repeating himself to me, which is also funny because as I'm reading the Old Testament, I'm comparing. So I have this really great Bible every day kind of thing, and I'm currently reading Kings and Chronicles at the same time because they're telling the same story, but it's slightly different because they were told at different times. So they have different things that they're trying to centralize in their stories. And then I'm also reading Proverbs because they are attributed so much to the era of Solomon. So that's where I'm at. That's where my studies are currently. So I want to thank you all, like Amber is saying, for coming. I will be here in 2 weeks. Ren, I recommend you for you. I think you would really like reading the book. It's Lamb, the Gospel According to Biff, Christ's Childhood Best Friend. Lamb is the main word. And if you look up lamb and Biff, you'll find it. Biff. It's a really good, it's the book of like the missing apostle kind of thing. It's fiction, but the author did a really good job in researching. And I think you would like that a lot. I do intend on having a really good trip. I hope it's great for myself and everybody else involved. I appreciate you all. The Alchemist Inkwell will still be going. We'll have 2 live episodes and 1 replay of a really great episode I recommend always listening to as much as we can. We like to centralize. We're going to start trying to centralize people that we've interviewed. We have enough now to be able to replay those when we have to do a replay. So we can start making sure people get more attention from that. So thank you all for your time, for your amazingness. And I will see you in 2 weeks. I hope everything stays safe and wonderful in that time. Bye.